I knew what it was. But yeah, usually I can tell.
Trees are something that are absolutely vital to our world in more ways than one. First and foremost, they help to provide the oxygen that we breathe and help take away the dangerous CO2 that we exhale. Secondly, they're a valuable resource, as we use tree bark and its other elements for things like building materials, paper, and so on.
To give you an idea of just how big this tree is.
Now, you all likely know that there are various kinds of trees all over the world, but do you know about the trees that are just a little bit different to look at? You know, the ones that stand out in many ways that you wouldn't expect? Well, if you don't, I'm going to help you today by showing you 20 of the most unusual trees in the world. Number 20. The rainbow eucalyptus. When most people think of a eucalyptus tree, they think about koalas and how they eat their leaves for one reason and another. But I'm not going to focus on the leaves this time. I'm instead going to focus on the tree trunk of the rainbow eucalyptus, because this is one of the few trees in the world that actually has a multicolored look. Many people think that plants can come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, but that's actually not true. In fact, that's straight up wrong, because plants don't have all of the pigments to make certain colors. Like why there's no such thing as a blue rose, despite Smurfette's well-intentioned wishes. As you look at the rainbow eucalyptus, you may wonder why this came to be, and I will more than happily explain it to you. This tree's trunk and limbs are a variegated display of browns, purples, oranges, reds, and yellows, and the colors arise from the unique quality of its bark and the staggered timing with which that bark sheds. Unlike trees, such as oaks, which have continually thickening layers of corky bark, eucalyptus trees shed thin layers of bark all throughout their lifetimes. And as a result of that, they eventually become rainbow-colored as they show off their different layers. Sometimes it's the air that the wood is exposed to which helps to change the colors, which includes turning into blue and purple shades over time, and by the time that it's ready to repeat the cycle, it's then back to being brown. And if you want to know the irony of this tree, well, it can be seen in many colors, but it's been used for years to make white paper. Regardless, I'm sure that some of you would be thrilled to have a tree like this in your home, as it would be quite the beautiful sight. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell right now, or this centipede will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. Number 19. The Dragon Blood Tree. The dragon's blood tree is a otherworldly plant that's native to the remote Socotra archipelago in the Indian Ocean. Its name stems from the crimson resin that it exudes when its bark is cut open, and it resembles the blood of a dragon, apparently. This ancient tree is a botanical wonder with a distinctive umbrella-shaped canopy of dagger-like leaves and a gnarled and almost surreal trunk that adapts to the harsh, arid conditions of Socotra. Endemic to the island, the dragon's blood tree holds cultural and medicinal significance for the local inhabitants, who have used its resin for centuries in things like dyes, cosmetics, and traditional remedies. This rare and charismatic species serves as a symbol of the unique biodiversity that's found on Socotra and the importance of conserving these extraordinary ecosystems. The island is known as another version of the Galapagos for the simple reason that there are plenty of plants and animal life on these unique rocks, one of which is the dragon blood tree. It features fruits that are small fleshy berries containing between 1 and 4 seeds, and as those fruits develop, they then turn from green to black and then become orange when ripe. They're quite popular with the birds of the islands, who will happily spread the seeds around to ensure the fruit's future growth. Another thing that actually ties them to mythical dragons is their age. These trees are known to be thousands of years old at times, and they live for so long that it can take them quite a while to reach the right age so that they can reproduce. And if you look at how the leaves at the top of the branches are positioned, that's not the typical formation that you may expect from a tree. But much like a dragon, it probably doesn't really care what you think. Number 18. The Baobab Tree. When you picture a tree, you may often think about ones that are small enough to fit in your front yard, or the massively round trees that can fill up places like the Amazon rainforest, the trunks of which have been growing for thousands of years. But there are few trees that take the bottom-heavy approach, and one of them is this tree from southern Africa. And what I mean by bottom-heavy is that when you look at them, well, just look at them. They're known as blobby trees because their trunks seem to get bigger the more that you go down them, and they can get much bigger than the ones you're seeing on the screen. A very old and hollow baobab in Zimbabwe is so big that it can actually hold up to 40 people inside of its trunk. Just think about that. That's one big tree. Just inside its trunk, it can house dozens of people. Yet apparently, that's not an uncommon occurrence with this type of tree. Some of the trees have been utilized as buildings by humans over the years, such as prisons, shops, houses, bus shelters, and storage barns. And in many ways, that's something to be praised, because that's the literal definition of using your resources to your advantage. They didn't have to use these trees like that, but they did, and they'll heavily benefit from it. Oh, and if you're curious about their leaves, they straight up shed them, and then remain in their bark state, if you will, until they die. Not only that, this is something they do on the regular in regards to dying. These trees do not die easily, surviving fires and growing new bark if they have been stripped. When they eventually die, they'll collapse from rotting on the inside and leave mounds of fibers behind. And so, they're the kind of tree to leave a mark both in life and in death. Number 17. The Kari tree. There are several plant species in the world that can be the tallest or the largest in an area, and it's all about measuring them to literally see where they stand. In New Zealand, this tree is one of the largest by volume in all of the nation. But just how tall can they get? Well, they can actually grow to 45 meters tall or more, and that becomes a really big tree. But what's odd about them is that they seem acutely aware of the fact that they are nearby other trees, and as such, all you'll see for quite the long time as you look up is the tree trunk, and then as you finally make it near the top of the tree, that's when you'll find the branches. Many people have said that these trees remind them of stone pillars that fill up a forest because of how gray their bark looks and the lack of branches. For better and for worse, this tree also features a high price for its bark. You can apparently sell a cubic meter of its bark for about $3,000. And there are some who claim that the market for these trees can be worth up to hundreds of millions of dollars. Sadly, this is quite believable, as people have valued these trees for a long time, but the problem is that they don't replant what they take, and that's why our world is in danger of losing all of these wonderful trees. It's also why it's up to us to do right by the trees and the people who admire them, because it would be a shame for trees like this to fully go away. Number 16. Traveler's Tree. Next up, we have a tree from Madagascar. That alone should pique your interest for the simple reason that such a tree is quite rare, and Madagascar is full of life that needs to be preserved. So, what is it that makes the traveler's tree so special? Well, take a look at how its top is shaped. You probably weren't expecting that now, were you? In fact, people are so stunned by how this tree looks at times that they're honestly unable to even describe it.
I knew what it was. But usually I can tell.
To many, it looks like the leaves and such from a fan, and you have to admit that it is pretty apt of a description of what we're seeing here. Not that you can expect this tree to cool you down if you ask it for a breeze, but wouldn't it be cool if you could? Now, if you, like many others who are out there, are thinking about trying to get this tree for yourself so that you can have it in your own front yard or wherever, you're going to need to be warned about a few things. First off, the reason that the tree looks the way it does is because of the conditions that it's in. Specifically, it needs a very sunny and tropic spot so that it can grow, get the heat and water it needs, but also not be beat down by the elements. For example, outside of Madagascar, you may find this tree in places like Hawaii, which makes sense when you think about it. But if you were to try and plant it somewhere else, your results would vary, likely because of the winds pelting the tree and thus changing its fan shape. So, much like in all plant care, you have to adhere to what the plant needs and not just what you want. Number 15. Yoshino Cherry. We're going to start this next entry with a bit of a twist because the Yoshino cherry tree, also known as something I'm not about to attempt to pronounce, is not a natural tree. In fact, it's a hybrid tree that takes the qualities of two very different trees and then brings them together to grow into a beautiful tree that is before you. And yes, it is a very popular tree in Japan and beyond because of its looks, and it's not really hard to see what that would be in the case. Now, this tree inherits the quality of blooming before the leaves unfold, and it also grows into a large-sized tree. It inherits the characteristics of the Oshima cherry, which grows rapidly and features white flowers, and these characteristics are favored and have become one of the most popular variations of cherry trees. In fact, you'll find plenty of these trees in the United States because they're considered a great landscaping tree. And if you're thinking that this hybrid was made in recent times, well, you would be wrong because it's said to have been born over 100 years ago. Is it odd that humanity and nature at times has blended a couple of different trees together? Well, no, not really. I mean, after all, humanity is known for its experimentation, and it's not afraid to go for broke to try and get what it likes. So they do it with animals, why not with trees? And you have to admit, the results really do speak for themselves here. It is a really beautiful looking tree. Number 14. Sharia Alborg's Banyan Tree. One of the best parts about trees as a whole is that they can be found almost anywhere on land, and when they grow in their natural way, they can sometimes surprise people by how they're shaped. For example, in Egypt, within Sharia Alborg, you'll find a banyan tree that has been growing for over 150 years. And because of this, it has a very unique shape that kind of defies all logic when you first look at it. Some of you may be thinking, well, that's a big tree, but are those natural to Egypt? And the answer is no, they're not. In fact, the tree in question was brought to Egypt from India during a period where the nation's ruler wanted to imitate other nations that they had been to. Sadly, not all of the trees survived in the modern day, but the ones that do are basically landmarks all in their own right. Just look at how the branches go out in every direction, and how the leaves are so thick the further that you go up. It's always incredible that trees can warp themselves in such ways and not have to constrain themselves by certain standards. Another uniquely shaped banyan tree is not far from where this one is, and people love to take pictures with it. Again, all of this happened because of a desire to bring in trees from other nations. The world can be a quite funny place sometimes. Number 13. The Deadvlay Tree. The entity known as the Deadvlay is a kind of clay. Namibia is where you'll find the largest concentration of the stuff, and around that area, you'll also find some of the highest dunes around. How high are those dunes? Well, they're said to be about 400 meters at times.
As you can see, this one, dune number 1, they say it's 100.
But no, there are no massive sandworms within them, although that might be for the best given how they are known to act. So what do trees have to do with this clay-like substance? Well, once upon a time, a clay pan would be formed in an area, and it was able to capture plenty of water. However, eventually a drought took place, and all of that water went away, and that meant that the clay remained, as did the trees, but the water wasn't there to nourish the trees that grew. As a result, the dead remains of the trees remain rooted in place, and it makes the pan look like a place of death. In fact, many people have named it a dead valley, except that it's not a valley by technical standards. What this proves is that even the most endurant of trees do need certain things to live, and one of them is water, and if they don't get it, they can end up looking like this. Number 12. The General Sherman Tree. Remember how I talked earlier about how there are plenty of the largest trees in the world? Well, prepare to meet the literal largest by volume. This is the General Sherman Tree, and as you can see, it can be classified quite easily as a big honking tree, standing at 83 meters tall and over 11 meters in diameter at its base. So yeah, like I said, it's a big honking tree, and when people go up to this tree, they look tiny by comparison.
นี่ต้นใหญ่มากใหญ่ที่สุดในโลกได้มั้ง
Something that you may not have expected with a tree like this is that it's actually quite fire resistant. It's not immune to be clear, but because of its size, its bark is very insulating, and thus it can withstand the heat and not catch on fire. However, if that fire is of a certain type, then even the trees like these will burn. That's why, in order to protect them, people will wrap them in protective aluminum. I mean, no really, they literally wrap the base of the trunk in them, and that helps to repel the fire even further. The area in which the General Sherman is in actually is a place called the Giant Forest, and you need to hike up a trail to reach where it is. So while it may take a little bit of effort to get there, once you do see this tree up close and personal, you're going to realize how great it is and how small that you really are in comparison. Number 11. The Tule Tree. We now head down to Mexico to talk about the Tule tree. But what's so special about this particular tree? Well, it's another one of those super large trees, and that makes me feel almost obligated to talk about it. There is a small twist here though. It's believed that the tree is representative of the people that live in its area. Why is that? Well, the tree is short, only about 35.4 meters in height, and stout at 11.62 meters in diameter. It's also rather old, being around 1,500 years old. So right off the bat, you can tell that this tree has connected with its nearby people, and that was all it took for them to want to admire it and protect it. Once thought to be so large that it could have only resulted from a merger between multiple trees, modern DNA analysis has confirmed that the Tule is, in fact, a single individual, which once again proves the incredible power of trees. Because we would have understood if this was indeed a kind of hybrid or rare case of two trees growing at once, but it's not the case at all. Now, another thing that's interesting to note is that the tree is actually still growing. Trees do eventually stop their rise into the air, but apparently this one has never stopped growing after 1,500 years. Perhaps it just got a second wind coming, it's hard to say. Either way, this is one of the many trees of Mexico that you should remember should you visit the area. Number 10. The Tree of Life. Now, I'm not talking about the Tree of Life from Disney that you'll see at one of their parks, though ironically, that one was actually modeled after a tree that I've already talked about. But instead, I'm talking about the Tree of Life that can be found in Bahrain. Why is it called that? Well, the area in which the tree grows is incredibly barren, and yet the tree is very much alive. The tree is abundantly covered in green leaves, and due to its age and the fact that it's the only major tree growing in the area, it's a local tourist attraction and is visited by approximately 65,000 people every single year. Nobody knows how it gets moisture in order to survive without much water, and yet it does, and like I love to say on this channel, life finds a way. Number 9. Angel Oak. Now here's another tree that doesn't mind taking up as much space as it desires simply because it can. The angel oak can be found in South Carolina, and it was quite spacious in its prime. It stands over 20 meters tall, measuring 8.5 meters in circumference, and produces shade that covers around 1,600 meters square.
To give you an idea of just how big this tree is.
So basically, if you stand anywhere at all under this tree, you're going to have some shade to relax in. When you look at it, you can see why so many people are weirded out by it. Its various branches went out in all directions and never stopped until they clearly wanted to. Some of them are basically even touching the ground while still connected to the tree. Thankfully for the people of South Carolina, the angel oak has been able to endure plenty of hardships, including a hurricane bringing it damage. Number 8. Dark Hedges. Now, first of all, dark hedges is a really good name for a set of trees. It kind of makes you picture all sorts of things that may or may not have happened. But to be clear, these are just basic trees, but they formed in a specific way. The trees form an atmospheric tunnel that has been used as a location in HBO's Game of Thrones, which has resulted in the avenue becoming a popular tourist attraction. And before you ask, I'm pretty sure that it was not used in season 8 of the show, alright? So don't blame the trees for that terrible finale. Even when you do view the trees from further down the road, you can see the almost fantastical shape of them and desire to get closer to them so that you can become engulfed by them. And like you've already seen before, sometimes trees will grow the way that they want to and not in the way that others would expect. Number 7. Great Basin Bristlecone Pine. Now remember how I said before that trees are shaped not by their own will, but by the nature and the environment that they're in. The Great Basin bristlecone pines are an excellent example of that. They're the oldest non-clonal species on the planet, and what makes them so special is that they have to put up with a whole lot of mess, and that's made them pretty endurant over the thousands of years of life that they've had.
And at that point, it was 3,200 years old.
They live well below the tree line in conditions that would wreck most trees, and yet they endure by growing very slowly. They can even go an entire year without growing much, and thus not add one ring to its base. The slow growth makes the wood dense, which provides resistance from insects, fungi, rot, and erosion, and they live in places where so little greenery will grow that not even fires can reach them without a whole lot of great effort. Number 6. The Blue Jacaranda. This next tree is not so much weird because of how it looks, but how people react to it. Simply put, the blue jacaranda is a beautiful tree, and people love to take a look at it, plant it so that they can admire it, and make all sorts of paintings that surround it. That's right, it's that kind of tree where people can't get enough of it for better and for worse. To be fair, they did pick a beautiful tree to do this with. The flowers that it grows can last for months and have a very vibrant purple coloring to them. Then, when the flowers are done, the pods will take their place. The unusually shaped tough pods, which are 5 to 8 centimeters across, are often gathered, cleaned, and used to decorate Christmas trees and dried arrangements. So yeah, like I said, people love these trees. Number 5. Axel Erlandsson's art trees. Up next, you're going to take a unique twist with these trees because Axel Erlandsson was no ordinary man. He was a farmer who had one very unique hobby, and that was shaping trees. By that, I mean that he would get the trees to grow in ways that were beyond even what nature can do on its own. As a result of this, he turned what could have been a basic farm into a tree circus, and then invited people to come and see the trees that he had helped to shape. That would lead to his circus being featured on Ripley's Believe It or Not a whopping 12 times. Now, it must have taken a whole lot of effort to make these trees look so spectacular, and yet he did it, and he did it basically until he died. And if you're curious, the trees are now part of a theme park. Number 4. Joshua Tree. Now, as I've already proven, trees can survive in just about any situation that you put them in, with only a few exceptions, and you may think that one of those exceptions is the deserts of the world. However, that would be incorrect. Trees can actually take the heat as shown via the Tree of Life, and in the case of Joshua trees, they're a type of tree that can last even in the Mojave Desert. The irony here is that they're not 100% trees, because they don't have some of the more clear markers to be able to name them as such. Specifically, they don't have tree rings, so it's very difficult to actually assess their age. They are so iconic, though, that in dry areas, they're heavily associated with the southwest area of the United States. Number 3. Red Silk Cotton Tree. Now we'll take a look at another really beautiful tree, as I'm sure you're aching for that. The red silk cotton tree is one that you'll find in several parts of the world, which includes places like Florida, where it was planted specifically so that it would flourish there and brighten up the nearby areas. Silk cotton trees are fast-growing, reaching heights of 160 meters or more, with a wide trunk of up to 3 meters girth, supported by a flared buttress. The trunk is spiny when the tree is young, but the stout conical spines will gradually disappear as the tree ages. Of course, though, the thing that everyone points out are the flowers that eventually bloom. They're a sight to behold, and they'll eventually fall to the ground when the tree sheds them off. Number 2. The Crooked Forest of Grafeno. Now look, I'm talking about the Crooked Forest of Grafeno, because I clearly have no idea what the Crooked Forest of Grafeno is or what it may look like. I wonder if its name could give me a clue about the trees that we're about to see. Yeah, I went really sarcastic there, because that's how I am. The Crooked Forest in question can be found in Poland, and it's actually a protected area by the country. For whatever reason, the trees of this forest just don't grow in a natural way, and so the base of their trunks are known for their crooked appearance. No one really knows exactly how this takes place, but human interference has not been ruled out. Number 1. The Trembling Giant. What if I told you that one of the oldest living organisms on Earth was actually a clone? How would you react to that? Before you answer, I am actually talking about a tree, and it's one known as the Trembling Giant. And yes, it's not only a clone, it happily clones itself to extend its life. You see, not unlike certain other plants that are out there, this tree has created a root system in a grove that is so massive that it's actually allowed it to live for 80,000 years. That root system currently has somewhere around 47,000 stems that creates the grove of trees that keeps that root system going. So, yes, this is both one tree and many trees that are bonded together so tightly that they're basically a singular living organism. And that's why it's about 80,000 years old. If not much older, it's hard to tell ages with these kinds of trees, you know. The Trembling Giant is a remarkable quaking aspen colony in Utah in the United States, and it's often considered to be one of the oldest and heaviest living organisms on Earth. As for why it's called the Trembling Giant, well, that name would be reflective of the leaves that it has. They feature a gentle quivering, showcasing nature's resilience and interconnectedness. And that's just about all from the realm of trees and the ones that absolutely are not like the ones you may see outside of your house. Were you surprised by the unique trees that the world has grown? And which one of these did you feel was the weirdest of the bunch? Perhaps there's another one that could have ended up on this list. Be sure to let me know all about it in the comments section down below. Check out the other cool things that are showing up on the screen, and I will see you next time. I love you.